Welcome to Residential Tech Talks. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Executive Editor of Residential Tech Today. On this week's podcast, our contributing editor, Michael Heiss, joins us from his home in Los Angeles to talk about his most recent articles on the latest smart home products and technologies. We'll discuss some of the challenges and maybe benefits of introducing new consumer tech during COVID times, and find out how soon you'll need to replace your current 4K TV with a model featuring mini LEDs. Michael Heiss, thanks for returning to the podcast.
Thank you. Anytime. Good to talk to you, Jeremy.
Hey, Saturday Night Live has the Five Timers Club. I'm sure you know about that. You are now officially part of, this is a very young podcast. You're part of the Two Timers Club. Now,
do I get a jacket, like Tom Hanks got for being on the Five Timer Club?
Right. No, not yet. We'll save that for the third visit. I don't have that kind of budget, but
now we need some swag. But you talked about trade shows. We need some swag, so I can have a thing that says residential tech. But that's one of the things I miss about not having in-person trade shows. I gotta go out and buy T-shirts.
Oh my gosh!
There are no tchotchkes. There's no T-shirts. The last, before things sort of, just went underground, T-shirts were replaced as the swag of choice by socks.
Oh, right.
And a lot of the, especially, the Silicon Valley companies, Roku and a bunch of others, were handing out socks.
Okay. Was that a hit with you at all? Are you wearing these socks? I'm sure you don't miss
Yes,
a chance.
The ones I have now are from August.
Okay. They're not literally from August. They're from a company called August.
No, they're from the Lock guys.
Yes, exactly. Okay. I was hoping that it wasn't that they hadn't been washed since August. That would have been bad.
Oh, no.
So you are self-described in an article that you wrote for me, a show dog, right? That's what the term was you used, similar to a road dog for a sales person. So you miss this in-person thing, not just the tchotchkes, but actually physically engaging with people, seeing products in person. I'm not a show guy. I don't love it. I was wishing for a career path that someday that I could not have to go to trade shows. And I think it's Stockholm syndrome where you fall in love with your captor, because I miss them now too, or phantom limb. I don't know what to call it, but I can't believe I miss those damn things. But I do dream of a day of one time returning to an in-person event where I can actually absorb a bunch of content ideas in one place and not have to try to do them virtually. How bad has it been for you?
Well, it's funny. It's, thinking about this before we started today, it's both good and bad. I don't miss the travel wear and tear. I miss the miles. I'm a miles whore, right? So, I miss the tchotchkes and the miles. I don't miss being away from home for extended periods of time, but particularly because I go to shows like ISE, I miss going to, shows in Europe and whatnot.
Right.
But there are some good and bad points, which I think go to where we should all take into consideration as shows eventually come back. Yes, I absolutely miss the ability to see, hear, feel. How did that TV look? I don't know, looking at it on my monitor, it looked okay. But, did this brand look better than that brand? I don't know. And that's something that you miss. I mean, compare it to things you can buy online and things you've got to see. Or I've ordered groceries online. It's sort of the peak of all of this. Mm-hmm. And I'm very particular about my groceries. And you check off, I want this, that, and the other thing. But unless you're there to, feel it and see it, you don't know. And that goes with things in our world as well. One of the good things, particularly about shows such as CEDIA Expo and CES, and even, I made a list, NAB, Infocom, Display Weeks, things like that, where there's a heavy educational content, the ability to have things online for a month or so after the show is really great. As a reporter covering a show for residential tech, you have to sit in a room with 1,000 people, have your notebook on your lap, make sure your phone battery doesn't run out, pick up your camera to take photos. It's a lot easier when you sit at your desk and you have a notebook in front of you and you can stop. Oh, wait a minute, what did he say? And you
Right.
can go back. So it's not a total win. One is good, one is bad. There are good parts to both. And from what I understand, as an example, CES is going to be hybrid this year. ISE, I know, is going to be hybrid. That said, I've made my plane reservation, not my plane reservations yet, but my hotel reservations for CES. I've got my teaching schedule for Expo. I'll be there. But beyond that, who knows? The only things I'm looking forward to is next week I get my second shot and the first haircut. You see, now you don't have to worry about that,
No.
but I'm getting my first haircut in 4 months.
Well, it's about
Because the
time.
woman that does my hair lives up in Northern California, and she said I can finally come down. So,
Ah.
there are things you miss and there are things you don't miss.
Well, I'm with you. I think we talked, a bunch of people have talked about the really creative way that Sony was able to do their presentation for CEDIA Expo virtually
Oh,
by,
that was amazing.
yeah, the building basically a set to walk you through. Of course, they've got all the equipment to do that and make it awesome. But for CES, which is the most recent big event that would have been in person that was virtual, it seemed like that for me, what I always get from you first and foremost is a video report on new TVs, new technologies going into
Right.
video. It seemed to me that the show, as it's becoming so big, it's always evolving, it's always sort of changing focus and direction. There were some things you wrote about that were away from the video category. Did you still find that there was a lot of video technology news?
There was, but especially in the case of the big companies, the Sonys, LGs, Samsungs, TCL, they all held. And now we're press people so that we can absorb the information and play it out to the readers and viewers. They all held pre-show events or briefings that gave us the opportunity to see things in a smaller group of people and have the ability to ask questions. No, I don't miss the first thing you do when you walk into Las Vegas Convention Center. You make an immediate right turn and you go through the LG tunnel. And there are hundreds of people in the booth, but you can walk by, see what you want. And if you don't understand something, I have a question, you can find somebody to assist you. That's something where trade shows virtually are harder, because if there are that same couple of hundred people stacked up and I'm jumping out of my chair for a question, but I'm waiting in line, or I can't say, yeah, I'll come back later. It just doesn't work that way. And I think that's the part that I found the most difficult. And another thing we were talking about before we started recording, particularly when it comes not for the big companies, but the little companies, the companies that you didn't know you came to see. And I wrote about a lot of them, for you. And we can't get pictures because usually I'd walk down Eureka Park and go snap, 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 and take pictures of these things. But if you can't see them, you can't get the pictures. And I think that may have worked to the disadvantage of some cool companies that had innovative products. I think they missed the exposure, and we in our industry missed the opportunity to know that something that we can use or adapt is out there.
Right. Well, I do want to touch on some of those companies, whether they realize that we're talking about them or not, because they're just not on the radar yet.
If they do, send pictures.
Yes, exactly. But first, I kind of wanted to go in a little bit more chronological order about how you've covered it for me. And one of the big topics that you first mentioned out of CES was mini LED. And I wanted to understand a little bit better how this backlighting technology improves the picture quality on these TVs as far as you can understand it.
Well, mini LED actually is pretty easy to describe. Initially, LCD sets. When people call it LED, I'm gonna jump down their throat. They're LCD for the most part. Excuse me. They're LCD panels, and since LCD panels are not self-illuminating, they're not emissive. You have to have some light to shine through the panel. Originally, those were done with CCFLs, compact fluorescent bulbs. That's environmentally and energy-wise inefficient. So the companies went to LEDs, either LEDs behind or LEDs on the edge that light up the picture. They're both good. Backlit is better because you have more control over which LEDs are on and off. Because if you look at a plasma in the day, remember plasma, or an OLED, they're not only emissive, but you can literally turn on and off every pixel. And when they're off, they're off.
Right.
With backlit, it's better than edgelit, but it's still, that's why people always talk about dimming zones. How many dimming zones, which means how many segments of the picture can you turn the LEDs on and off? Mini LEDs, as the name, shows, are smaller. They're not micro LEDs, they're mini LEDs. So you have more of them behind the LCD panel. You therefore have more control over the brightness in the dimming zone. And because there are more of them, you have more brightness. It's expensive. It's not as cheap as a regular edgelit panel or even a nominal backlit panel, but you're going to start, it's not going to be everywhere. It's being touted, and I think correctly so, as a competitor to OLED.
Okay.
Over time, the question is, like any other technology in our world, how soon and by how much will the cost come down? All driven by the manufacturing side of things. And right now, those guys are in a world of hurt. There are a lot of issues with semiconductors. I don't know, perhaps off to the side, but if anybody has seen in the news about the initiatives to try and cure the supply chain, it's not a joke. And then you add on to that, in our world, AKM, which is a major component supplier of things like DACs and some of the high performance audio components, they had a huge fire and their factory burned down. And when you have sole source parts, you're in a world of hurts. Then you compound that by the fact that the automotive world is sort of sucking out a lot of parts out of the market, and even they can't get them. And let me see, automotive industry, consumer electronics, who wins?
Right.
So I think it's not going to be unexpected to see some product shortages going into the year, as the combination of manufacturers trying to figure out what to do when you have, as an example, an AVR that's dependent upon a sole source part. And when the supply runs out, you're hosed.
Wow.
Not their fault, but
Yeah.
that kind of thing is going to have an impact on the industry. But I digress.
Well, and so back to mini LED, that you said specifically that Sony is not using that yet. They probably are on their own path, because Sony does often have its own proprietary technologies. But I did,
sooner or later I think they'll have to do it.
Okay.
Unless they take the leap, and from a pricing standpoint, it just isn't there yet to go to micro LEDs, where you do see the LED, like Samsung's The Wall and similar kind of products. And Sony was one of the first to show that at a CES like 5 years ago. But you're going to see TCL is pushing that big. Samsung will have it. LG will have it. Other brands will have it. And, for somebody that's making the selection as to what display to use, it becomes another option.
See, this is why I took so long to actually buy a new TV. I had a plasma, much too small, 42-inch, which was great at the time. and then it became ridiculously small compared to everything that was on the market, but I could not let go of that plasma. And I kept seeing, well, they're better. This thing's better than that thing. I can't afford it though. It's too much. And then I finally just bit the bullet and got an LCD TV with LED backlight. And then only when I started, it took months until I realized the flaw in my choice, my decision, which was those dark scenes where you got a bright element with the black background and it just bleeds around it. You can see the lighting. It's almost like a spotlight hitting that area. And it's just one of those things you don't experience in a demo because they're not trying to show you that.
And that's hard to see. And, again, to some of the points that we're discussing today, that's really hard to see, even in the best, highest production value demo reel. And I'm sitting here watching it on, it is a 1080p monitor on my computer, but it's just, you can't see some of those artifacts by the nature of the process. If you like plasma, you want an OLED.
I know.
A mini LED will almost be as good. And when you add in quantum dot and a few other things, it's a toss-up, and it becomes, as much as anything, whether the people are listening here are consumers or people in the industry. It's a matter of price, brand preference, and the other things that attach to a display. The style, is it a thin bezel or a thick bezel? And do you like the remote control? And something that's becoming increasingly important is how much of the smart TV app accessibility is built into a display. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I'm a fan of outboard streamers.
Right, me too.
Because no matter what's built into the set, and there are a lot of, make no mistake about it, there are a lot of good ones, I just would rather spend another, somewhere between 50 and as much as $200 for an outboard streamer, because the content is going to be updated more frequently and the life of that will go on. The upgrade cycle for smart TVs has generally been about kind of 3-ish years. So the smarts, I won't name the brand, in the 65-inch 4K that's in our den, it ain't, it be what it be, and that's it. That's why it's got, well, it's me, but that's why it's got an Apple TV, a Fire TV, an NVIDIA Shield, and a Roku attached to it.
Right. So in addition, you covered about new screen sizes, new trends, I guess, in screen sizes.
75 is the new 65.
Yeah. So those are going to be the most widespread models. And I mean, that's just crazy to think. I upgraded to 65 and I couldn't believe how it dominated the room. Now we've gotten used to it, but wow, 75 is a big TV. And you also mentioned game-centric TVs. What's that mean?
Well, there's a lot of technology that's going into displays or TV sets these days, and to some extent in conjunction with HDMI 2.1, that make it better when you play a game. And the one that's at the forefront of that list of things is VRR, which means that you've got games rather than what you're looking at now, or when you're watching TV tonight and binging something over the weekend. It's got a frame rate, and the frame rate is the frame rate is the frame rate, and it doesn't change. Games have a variable frame rate, variable refresh. And if the output is changing faster than the display can react, you're going to get tearing. You're going to get all sorts of funky artifacts. VRR, variable refresh rate, is a way to mitigate that, depending upon the technology, to a greater or a lesser degree. So if you're a gamer, having that feature is a reason to buy a TV set. Having HDMI 2.1 is a reason to buy a new TV set. I'm not embarrassed to say it. I love shows. I love tchotchkes. And I won a Sony PlayStation in one of the press events. Don't have it yet, but for that, and I'm not a gamer, so it's not a big deal. But if I were a gamer, I'd want to think about getting a new TV set, flip that around to somebody who is in the design install world. You might want to say, if your client is a gamer or there are gamers in the house and they want to get the new Xbox or new PlayStation 5, then you can explain to them there are features that are in the new TV sets that are game centric. I'm not trying to sell you a new TV set, but since you've already bought this game, don't you really want a new TV set to get the utmost out of this new game? And there was a lot of that was being highlighted by the various manufacturers across the board.
Okay. Well, after we return from a short break, Michael will tell us about his favorite "why didn't I think of that" technologies that he found at CES, as well as other technologies catering to this weird year that we've experienced this past 12 months. So we'll be return after a short break.
This episode of Residential Tech Talks is brought to you by Ring, home security systems and smart home automation. Get protection at every corner with their intelligent security cameras, alarm systems, and video doorbells. Receive notifications when motion is detected or check on your home anytime with Live View in the Ring app. Help keep your neighborhood safer with the Neighbors app to share information and discuss safety concerns in this hyper-local social networking platform. Ring's mission is simple: make neighborhoods safer. Discover all the smart home security products by Ring. Go to ring.com.
Welcome back. I'm talking with Residential Tech Today contributing editor and CEDIA Lifetime Achievement Award winner Michael Heiss. There was an area at CES that was pretty much touching on all of what we were dealing with the pandemic this past year, and that was touchless controllers and devices that incorporating UV light to sanitize surfaces. You mentioned in one of your articles, Michael, about faucets and toilet flush handles that were common touch points in the home being replaced by sensors and things like that with Kohler, Moen. I guess that's how you pronounce it. I've never actually said that out loud. Moen, okay, right. And others. So I saw some of that as well. How much of that did you find interesting? What were some of the trends there that you saw?
Well, it's not new. I mean, anybody who's, how can I say this gingerly? Anybody who has been to a restroom in a place of public accommodation over the last lots of years, if you're in an airport restroom, you don't want to be touching that. Pandemic aside, you don't know who was in there. You don't want to be touching that thing. So they've been using, infrared sensors for that for years. In a home environment, you kind of know who's there and you can yell at them to wash their hands, and you don't have the same concerns as you do in public accommodation. Things have changed, right? Look at where we've been for the last year. So that's not something that is necessarily new, but I subscribe to, and one of the things, we'll come back to the original point, one of the things that Eureka Park, which I miss, is being able to, walk down the aisle in the basement of the Sands Exhibit Center and say, wow, I never saw that before. That's cool. And if one year you see one thing in that particular category, one year it was dog feeders. Like, oh, wow, that's cool. Why didn't I think of that if I'm so smart? Right. But then you come back the next year and there are a dozen of them. And you come back the year after and there are dozens and dozens of them. That's a trend and you better get on it. And that's where the touchless plumbing comes in. In a bathroom, yeah, okay, you can, we don't want to get into the nitty gritty here, but you can rationalize that. But how about the sink in the kitchen? Why do doctors have foot pedals to turn the water on and off when they're scrubbing up? Mm-hmm. And if you look at a kitchen, it makes sense. Is it a new technology? Absolutely not. It is a new and expanded application of existing technology, you betcha. What does that tell you? It's something that you should consider, again, depending upon whether you're building a house for yourself or doing that sort of stuff as a living. The light bulb should go off. Is that something that you want to inquire and see if people want or need, or be prepared to explain why you might want it?
Right. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was incorporated as well was that voice control of the water, which I thought was maybe a little bit of a stretch, but it's kind of cool that you could have this hands-free situation where you're handling the big heavy pot to fill up
Yep.
with water, and you say fill, three cups or something, whatever it is.
3 cups at 75 degrees.
Right.
Or this recipe calls for cold water. I need 3 cups of cold water. Did you hear me? I want cold water. That kind of thing. And yeah, that's a good combination of technology. And, I always say, I never encourage people to rip off somebody else's technology. Rather, use and adapt the technology to your own needs. And that's where this kind of thing, comes into play. The other thing, but plumbing, before we leave plumbing, one of the cool things was a Bluetooth equipped shower head. That's been around for a couple years. I've got one I've never installed because I'm lazy. I've got one that's like, 5 years old, sitting in the garage, waiting to be installed because it's so difficult to do that. But somebody had one at, finger quotes, on display at CES that had a little generator in it, and the force of the water coming through the pipe out the shower head charged a little battery so you didn't have to connect it. You're like, okay, that's pretty cool. So that sort of thing. But another good example of that is Alarm.com had a pressure sensor under a doormat.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. That was really a cool innovation. You let off that with the article.
It's so bloody obvious. Why didn't I think of that?
Mm-hmm.
Now, my office window looks out, on the corner, and I know when the guy in the Amazon truck or FedEx or the, postal carrier is there. But what if they want to spray the, if it's a bad guy, a porch pirate, and they want to spray the paint over your video doorbell? How do you know that there's somebody there? But if there's a sensor under the doormat, that'll ring the doorbell. And in normal circumstances, a thing will pop up on a screen in your kitchen or house or wherever. You're like, oh yeah, that's the guy who's trying to sell me solar panels. I'm not going to answer the door. Oh man, that's the delivery person with this expensive thing I ordered. I better go out and get it right away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so simple.
Right.
But who thought of it? They did. Good for them.
Yeah, exactly. And you also, in that same article, you talked about the connected nursery trend, which I thought was really...
and that's been going for a while with, sort of obvious things. I mean, baby monitors are as old as babies themselves, and baby monitors became video baby monitors. But now with the combination of advanced sensors and a lot of AI, there were some very, very clever uses of that to not just, the baby's crying, but to monitor what the infant is doing, either to say they're awake, oh man, I better go in and see what's going on, or, and you hesitate to say it, but it's maybe even more important, what if they're not awake?
Yeah.
And, and SID and all of that. And a lot of AI that combines what the sensors are reporting with the typical patterns of that particular infant or toddler. And I think, been a long time since I've been a young parent, but maybe one day grandchildren, and I'll buy one, when we have grandchildren, right? Yeah. that sort of stuff, there were some very unique applications. One of them was, or two of them, senses the activity of the child, and if they were getting a little cranky, it bounced the bed. Very, and to, with 5 different speed settings, so it can lull the child back to sleep. Now, I don't know if you did this, but our son, he's now 34, for goodness sakes, but he was a cranky sleeper to the point where I thought the neighbors were going to call Child Protective Services because he would cry all night. And what did you do as a young parent? You put him in the car and you drove him around a block because that soothed them. Well, what if you had a very slight vibration sort of in a bumper around the baby or under the mattress, or the whole thing bounced up and down? It's like the old thing in motels, a vibrating bed that started and everything old is new again, that started and stopped in reaction to what the infant was doing. But then how about you add on to that, not just a camera, but a night vision camera? Or how about you add into that a camera and a night vision camera that's tied to a clock, so that not only do you know what's going on, but it'll timestamp, oh, the baby was crying, we're out on a date somewhere, and we knew that the caretaker or the babysitter came in, and at what time. Obvious stuff, but why didn't we think of it? There were some really cool things. The one that I found the most disturbing,
I know the one you're going to talk about, the
where
car.
I'm going,
Yeah.
is 2 different products that sensed whether or not you left a baby in the car. Are you kidding me? I mean, really. And one of them does it because you pair it up with your cell phone. And obviously, if you're an important person and you, oh yeah, the kid's in the back seat, I got to go and, get a quart of milk or something. And when the car seat device loses the Bluetooth connection, it then pings your phone that says, yo, idiot, you left your kid in the car, for crying out loud. And then one of them was just a mat that slipped under the car seat. And after 45 seconds, it pings your phone. After 2 minutes, it pings your appointed, second person. After some number of times, it calls somebody else. And my take on it is, if you left a kid in the car, the first one it should call is Child Protective Services and the cops, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
But, invention is the mother of necessity.
The only thing, I made a leap on this one because I could not make sense of how this needs to exist. But if you had a babysitter or a nanny, it was a way for a parent to feel more trusting of that person if they're removing the kid from the home and going somewhere that they're being responsible and not trying to get away with leaving the kid in the car or something.
Sure, no, having a fire, the best thing about having a fire extinguisher is never having to use it.
Yeah.
But when you need it, it's there. And unfortunately, I mean, you see it every year, kid left in in the middle of a heat wave in the car.
Right.
A kid left in a car when it's cold because somebody went in to buy whatever. And regrettably, you see that. Now, I'm going to give away a free idea, but since I'm doing this in a public forum, you can't patent it, and I want 10% there, listeners. Take that same time, but this is actually important. Take the technology that somebody else has done, and why don't you use that same technology for a dog harness? People kind of tend not to leave their kids in the car, thankfully, but people do leave their pets in the car, their dogs. I don't know people taking a cat in the car, but people, leave their dog in the car because they figure, what the heck, it's a dog. Well, hot and cold impacts them also.
Right.
And why don't you apply that same technology to a car pet harness?
Right. Well, on the topic of home health, similar topic, I guess, there was a product from Our Air, I believe, AUR Air,
Yeah, and they put that in the release. It's pronounced our, not your air, our air.
Yes, the Arrow 1, numeral 1, and it's one of these sensors, or I guess CO2 monitor, smoke monitor type of thing, VOCs. So, what do you know about that product?
Well, again, I know about it because I saw it in the virtual CES, but here's the problem. Regrettably, I couldn't walk up to the booth and ask them questions or ask them to demonstrate it or say, well, what if this, can it do that? So, to be fair, there's stuff that I don't know because I just read the press release, but it is a monitor, as you said, but it has all the triggers built in. Do I want to open the windows if you can? Do I want to turn on the air filter? Do I want to turn on a fan? What do I want to do based on the condition at the time? One of the things that was interesting is that, I mean, everybody's got, you have to, it's the law, and in almost every jurisdiction, you have to have a smoke detector and a CO2 detector. But what about VOC? What about particulate matter? And those are the kinds of things where, yes, you didn't think of it. Somebody else thunk it up, and making a thing like that is pretty wild. But then you can use it and implement it into a system. There's one other thing that I like to mention, just because I think it was the neatest idea, and I don't remember if I mentioned it in the article, was the AI-driven recycling bin.
That wasn't in the article.
The name of which escapes me at the moment. And this is still a startup, but it's going to be coming out this year. It replaces, we have a compactor. We haven't redone the kitchen in 15 years. And I'm going to take the compactor out and maybe probably put in a wine cooler or something. But this is a device that's about the size of what you used to have for a compactor. And today, with people want to recycle, but they don't know if they can or how to. So you put something in the little bin. Is it a clear bottle, a brown bottle, a green bottle? Is it plastic with the 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, or does it have a label on it? And you put it in the little receptacle. Thanks to sensors and AI, it can actually figure out what you've just put in. And if it's something that just can't be recycled, it sort of tosses it into one bin. But if it's, for example, a bottle, it will sense the color, sense the type of material, wash off the label, wash the inside of the thing, and then crush it and put the crumbles into a bin divided by type of material. And then you can either recycle it, or the company, I'll have to send you the link for that, the company will then collect it, and you even get a piece of the action. So you help the planet, you can feel environmentally conscious, and maybe have a little ROI. I mean, that's out of the box thinking.
Yeah, now that sounds like something that would require a bigger space than what you described, but it's pretty awesome if that all happens in that space. And it reminds me of one of these technologies you would see at CES in the appliance areas of these major Asian manufacturer companies, like a clothes folding device, that closet.
But when you got to stop right there. I've been writing about that since the first time I saw it, maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And everybody, and maybe it's out there, but there was one that was about $1,100, and there was one huge one that you may have seen that was like $15,000. Didn't see too much about it this year. So there's an example of, you got to sometimes wait through the hype cycle to see if it's real. Right. If you can afford $15,000 to buy a laundry folding thing, take the stuff to the bloody laundry, or have somebody come in and do the laundry for you.
Exactly. Well, I obviously this has a greater good potential, this recycling
Oh, for sure.
device. But it just, to me, it's like, wow, there's a lot of moving parts that seem to have to come together, even with AI, to make that work. But really cool sounding.
You
And
know,
what,
they say they're doing a 70 home trial up in Menlo Park. What a
okay.
surprise.
Oh yeah.
What do you call it? This year.
Okay.
So, you know, stranger and more complex devices have been constructed, and, you know, good luck to them.
Well, when we get off the interview here, I'll get that website from you, and we'll put
Sure.
that in the show notes when we post the podcast. So, and just to wrap up, I know that you've got something else on your horizon here as far as an article, and believe it has to do with what we're doing right now, which for those watching the video is engaging on Zoom. You wrote about the importance of the audio component of the Zoom presentation. Now you're going to address the video side, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And, you know, audio is important. I mean, anybody looking at when you're on the screen, you can see that you've got a microphone. I have a microphone that's off camera, but I either have a microphone or sometimes I have, you know, you put on your headsets with a microphone, because it's important that people, what a novel concept, can understand what you're saying with clarity and that you can hear them. You know, different types of headphones. Wired is better. I mean, maybe, and that's the good part. You're wearing an in-ear monitor, and maybe, why don't you just sort of show the cable? Yeah, there you go. Gee, it's just like you're, you know, on CNN or something, or you're a Secret Service agent with a little squiggly thing. But you don't have to spend a lot of money, but you can use that sort of thing, and as a participant in a Zoom, look more professional and have better clarity for the people that are trying to listen to you, and have you hear them. That's why, I mean, again, here's on ear, and I've got at the other end of the desk over ears, depending upon the environment. That's just something that people don't think about. Um, using the microphone that's in the webcam, okay, it's better than nothing. But when you get into people who are using tablets or smartphones, you want something more. I have a thing about AirPods because I think they look goony with the little things hanging down, but they're very popular, and I know they sound good. But TWS, True Wireless Stereo earbuds, are great. Some are better for this than others, and they're mentioned in the article. People just ignore the audio side of things, and that's just something you shouldn't do.
So give us a little hint about how you're going to address then the video side, because a lot of us have embedded cameras in a laptop screen, or maybe an external camera. Are you going to cover cameras, lighting,
You
all the
bet your
above?
bootskis. So, and again, in my office, I've got one setup. That's my main work area that we're using now, and it's got 3 screens, and it's got a webcam over there, and I've got a lot of lights, and those are things. And I originally come from a TV production world, so those are things that are natural, but they're a little, and not ridiculously expensive, things that you can do to make the picture look better. Better light. At the other side of the desk, I've got another setup that I use when I do Zoom courses or other things with my wife. And one of the things that people don't realize is that the field of view is very important. So my camera here is just about arm's length, and it's just me. But if you're doing a family Zoom, or if 2 of you are in a course or you know, faith service or whatever, you want to be able to see. So I can move over here, and my wife can sit over here, because there's a wide enough field of view. But if the camera has a narrow field of view, you're only going to see one person. And there are specs that you could look into that will help guide the user to that. Another thing, for those who really want good video quality, a lot of the well, nobody has point and shoot cameras anymore. You either use your phone or you have a DSLR. And if you have a DSLR and you want to use that for your video conferences, those typically have an HDMI output. The input to your computer for Zoom and WebEx and so forth is USB. And you're like, how do I connect those two together? You spend anywhere between $35 and $75 and you get an adapter. Wow, what a novel concept. If you already have the camera, buy the adapter and you're golden. And those are the kinds of things that once you hear about it or think about it, maybe they seem obvious, but if you haven't thought about it, it's just out there. All kinds of extension cords. And one of the things I've recommended to people that some of them a little bit more on the elderly side that use tablets or smartphones is to beam it up to their TV, either by using a Lightning or USB-C or mini connector, micro connector, and connect it to your TV set, or use AirPlay, use an Apple TV or use Chromecast so that you can sit back. Please put the tablet on a stand so you don't get the up your nose. That drives me even more crazy than earpods. So that you can get a full facial thing, and then you can see everybody on the Zoom. If people are into Zooms and you get crazy because you've got 28 people in a little smartphone or even on a tablet, you want to go, oh, that's Uncle Joe, but is it Uncle Joe, and is that his mistress, or is that Aunt Martha sitting next to him? You want to have that on the big TV. And that's the kind of thing that is easy to do when you know how to do it, and we're gonna be writing about that. I mean, one other thing is docks, and I've got a bunch of them. I'm using 2 of them now because you run out of USB ports and you run out of HDMI ports. So the monitors that I'm using now are connected via one of the docks I have from a company called OWC that's got 2 HDMI 4K outputs. That just makes life so much easier. Connect your speakers to it. It's obvious, or particularly if people are doing things that are tablet, smartphone, or even laptop based. If you have a product, a computer, or the one I'm using now that has USB-C power delivery, then you don't even need to use the external adapter. It just comes in through the dock. And that's just one of, again, if it's so obvious, but you haven't thought about it, I feel that our job here at Residential Tech is to bring it to your attention so that, you can look smart too. Even there are power strips. Well, what's the big deal with power strips? Well, power strips were designed, 300 years ago for people to plug plugs into it. But what if you've got 12 different wall wart adapters? A 6-outlet power strip can only accommodate 2 or 3 things, but there are power strips from a number of manufacturers that either have more spacing or have the orientation done so that you can fit in the adapter for this, the adapter for that, the adapter for something else. And that's, that's a real easy one. And since I know there are a lot of professionals that are watching this, there's an even easier one that I think it's obvious, but I'm not sure many people use. The big power strips that you'd run inside a rack, an equipment rack, which typically have about 3 or 4 inch spacing between the AC outlets. There are smaller ones than that than the big 6-foot-long ones you put inside a rack. And those are perfect. And I've got 5 of them running across the surface of my desktop here. And that way I have room to plug everything in. That's an easy thing to do. And boy, does it make you look good.
Well, as usual, you've covered a lot of tech, a lot of little gadgets here and there, and big stuff too. Michael Heiss is a CEDIA Lifetime Achievement Award winner, contributing editor of Residential Tech Today, and you can learn more about his background on episode 30 of Residential Tech Talk, so you can go back and listen to that. Michael, best of luck for 2021. Thanks so much for being on the podcast again.
You too, Jeremy, anytime.
Also, thanks to everyone for joining us. Be sure to share, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. And check out all the latest residential tech news at restechtoday.com. Until next time, please stay safe, stay inspired, and let us know if you have a great story to tell.
Residential Tech Talk, lighting specialist to residential tech.